Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Infinite Multihued. As usual, my name remains Francisca, and today we have Helen with us. Our team for today is Beyond Parenting in Neurodivergent Families, and she's going to be talking to us about her own experience and how to help parents and carers of neurodivergent families find their fates. So we're going straight into this now. Hi, Helen. Could you
Hi,
kindly intro
Francisca.
could you kindly introduce yourself to us?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Helen Buzdugan. I'm in the UK. I am an AuDHDer, so quite newly discovered. I'm a qualified careers advisor. So I've been a careers practitioner in education, higher education, working in schools as well, and private practice for over 20 years. 18 months ago, I founded True to You Careers, and I now help parents and carers in neurodivergent and what we call SEN, special educational needs families,
Mhm.
find flexible work when life at home is complicated. So that's how I describe myself. I also live with my husband. I have two neurodivergent children. And as of 7 weeks ago, alongside running my business, I'm also a full-time home educator to our 11-year-old.
That's a handful.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Yeah, so that means that I now have a dual diagnosis of autism and ADHD. And I think you're going to ask me about that a bit more, aren't you? A little bit later.
All right. Okay, that's perfect. Could you kindly describe your life before your diagnosis?
Yeah. So I would say that in the months and years leading up to my diagnosis, life was pretty turbulent and a lot of things came together and collided for me. So, I've been working for quite a long time as a careers consultant at a university in the careers department there. So, my job was helping students and graduates find graduate jobs. And I loved my job for a very long time. It gave me a great deal of fulfillment and satisfaction. However, there were some things that were always very difficult at work for me. And so, let's talk about a few of those things. I could talk all day about those things, but let's talk about a few of those. So, one of them was that I just always struggled with the organization and planning side of things. So, I would ha always have a million different ideas that I wanted to pursue, but it was really difficult for me to actually plan a piece of work. And also once I guess now what I know to be the dopamine, I guess, that I
Mm-hmm.
needed started to wane, then it would be really difficult for me to finish a project. Like writing a report was the worst thing for me. I felt like I'd rather go and have root canal treatment as a dentist rather than write a report. Um, and also, other things that I struggled with were micromanagement. So I realized I needed an awful lot of autonomy in my work. I'm quite creative, I'm an ideas person, and I flourish when I'm given that opportunity to um, develop those ideas. I'm always looking for problems that I can solve and new ways of doing things. And when I first started in that job, I had a lot of opportunity to do that. And so I really thrived. I really did well. I got a good name for myself in my field. I was training other practitioners. But then we got a manager in who really treated people like a column on a spreadsheet. So you're here, this is your job. You can go and deliver this. I'm going to give you a presentation. You need to deliver it exactly how I wrote it. And it was killing me on the inside. And then there were other things like the sensory overload. So working,
Yeah.
in a shared open plan office with a big photocopier next to me was churning out documents all day long, people coming in and out, having little
Mm-hmm.
conversations. Couldn't concentrate. So I used to take my work home in the evenings and work at home feeling guilty that I was taking time away from my children because I wasn't focused on my work during the daytime and I was, basically performing work in the day
Mm-hmm.
and doing the actual work at home in my bedroom. So that was really difficult. But also we had other things going on at home. So my youngest we hit lockdown. So that's when it was almost like a perfect storm of everything going on. My youngest during lockdown started to display signs
Mm.
of neurodivergence. So
Okay.
I didn't know at the time what we were dealing with, but I noticed that he was really struggling to, stay in a seat. He was interrupting the teacher on the Zoom call, couldn't concentrate, was had difficulties writing, was a lot of demand avoidance because suddenly I was in the position of a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was at home, children were all at home. And also my work shifted to the evenings. So I was working part-time, but I had to fit in all my work after the school day was done.
Mm-hmm.
So I was under an awful lot of pressure. At the same time, I didn't know I was in perimenopause. So
Oh,
everything
wow.
was going on. And we
At
know
the
now
same time.
there's a lot of research about the interplay between perimenopause and ADHD for women of my age.
I think I
So my
should look into
GP,
that.
yeah, my GP discovered the perimenopause first. I had so many doctor's appointments. I was off work with anxiety, but actually the anxiety was really my ADHD not coping in the position that I'd been in, along with the perimenopause. So now I kind of have a better sense of my anxiety and depression, which I have had a history of, and why that was the case, because a lot of that was about a poor fit. Um, it was only later that I realized I had ADHD. It was kind of seeing it in my son, and I think that's the case for a lot of people of
Mhm.
my generation who are parents. That's the sort of journey that we see quite often, is like noticing signs in our children which may be picked up in school or we may be seeing at home, and then saying, huh, hang on a minute. She
We need to
looks
look into
really
this.
familiar. Like my eldest this morning, um, he was running around the house looking for his blazer and tie for school. And it just reminded me of myself as a teenager. It really
Mhm.
did. But at the time I didn't know, so I didn't,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like you said, the last person we had of our interview with said she didn't get her diagnosis until she was 38. And that brings me to my
Wow.
next
Yeah.
question. When did you
Yes.
get your diagnosis and how did it change your life?
Oh, well. So I was 49 when I got my diagnosis. Yeah. So it was 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago now. So I'm 52.
Oh, wow.
And it really, was a journey. So I'd been on hormone replacement therapy, HRT, for my perimenopause, so an estrogen replacement. And
Okay.
that was designed to help with, things like brain fog, things like, organization and planning that perimenopausal women have a lot of difficulty with, because that's starting to be more known now.
Mm-hmm.
But there was still something missing. I was still finding things difficult because I think things were difficult at home anyway with,
Mm-hmm.
neurodivergent child. And things were difficult at work. So I actually took voluntary redundancy from my job because I was really struggling to cope. And I think this is actually a common thing for women of my age when perimenopause and ADHD collide, especially, that work just becomes too hard. So I took voluntary redundancy when it came up. I have fortunately had the opportunity to do that. And I thought, I need a new way of living. I need a new way to make this work. And at the time, I had a referral for ADHD because I felt like I needed more answers. So I think I was already on the journey of discovery before I actually got my diagnosis. It wasn't like um a sort of like moment where I got my diagnosis and then suddenly everything made sense. I would say that it was more like a data point on a journey, on a path. So that discovery started when I first started seeing the signs in my son, and when I got my ADHD diagnosis. I think I started first replaying everything from the past, which I think a lot of people do, especially late diagnosed like me. So I look back at a lot of things where I was called dizzy, I was called kind of weird, where I actually, I kind of embraced my weird. I always embrace my weird, so I'm really grateful for that. And I was always looking for people who were weird like me, and I knew that I'd sought out other other people who I now
Yeah.
know are
Mm-hmm.
neurodivergent. So, for example, an old school friend got in touch with me a few weeks ago because she'd seen my post on social media.
Yeah.
And she was one of my best friends at school, but we kind of lost touch. And she said, Helen, I've just been loving following your posts about your journey, and about your ADHD. And she said, I realized that I had ADHD. I thought, oh my goodness. Yes, you so did. But it's only now that I look at that and think that's why we gravitated to each
Mm-hmm.
other. That's why we discovered each other because of that. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah. So I think it really helped me make sense of the struggles
Mm-hmm.
and also embrace the strengths that I have in myself that I feel like actually were rejected a lot in the workplace because I worked in usually very large, very sort of hierarchical, tightly structured organizations with lots of rules and lots of processes and things like that that didn't really allow me to have a lot of freedom, have a lot of autonomy, develop my creativity. Um, and so it really became an opportunity to look for that, and seek out what kind of work would allow me to, focus more on my strengths and
Or
make more of my
yeah.
strengths, and would actually provide support for my struggles or kind of, would just be an environment where I wouldn't be struggling with the same things.
Mm-hmm. That's quite interesting. And I think it's quite important for us to be able to find our strengths. And it's easier to do that when we get our diagnosis and you just know, okay, this is the problem. And I like that the fact that you're able to spend time reflecting on, how things have been for you. And then you're able to understand, okay, this is it. And then you found your way forward from that. So that's a good one. So I also like to ask, you help parents and carers of neurodivergent families find fitting jobs. What made you start that?
So, I was working in schools after I finished working in the university.
Okay.
I started working in schools for some time as a careers advisor. That was kind of very different experience. And one group of young people that I was working with were neurodivergent young people with what we call EHCPs, Education Healthcare Plans. So that is a
Okay.
specific statement or plan that a child who's neurodivergent or disabled might have that spells out the support that they will get in school.
Okay.
And I worked with a lot of children that were just not able to attend school because the provision was not suitable for them.
Mm-hmm.
So the schools would call these children school refusers. It's awful because it's such a label. It's
Mm-hmm.
such a label, but that was the label that's given to these young people. So we're talking like 15, 16-year-olds. My job in that school was to see every student who was registered at the school and support them with their plans after school. So college, apprenticeships, further study, and look at how that would link with their longer term career plans. So it's a great job. But because my responsibility was to see everybody at the school, and there were some children, there were always maybe, a percentage of children that were not as regularly attending, I would often have conversations with the parents. And I had this one conversation with a parent on the phone where I was trying to see if I could maybe have a phone call or a visit with the young person. And the parent interrupted me and said, "Look, let me just stop you there." Because I was suggesting that her son could maybe attend a college open event the following day.
Okay.
And she told me that she had to attend court the next day to fight a school attendance fine because she was being
Oh,
prosecuted by her local authority because her child had not been able to attend
not
school.
in school.
Yeah, so there is a lot of parent blaming, and that was my first
Mhm.
discovery of how much parents are blamed for their children being different, essentially. Because
Mm-hmm.
the children aren't accepted, then who is to blame for that? It's often the parents. The parents are to blame. And so I went into my own journey of discovery on this and realized just how much parents struggle behind the scenes with everything to do with supporting their children in school, as their children are, they discover their children's neurodivergence, but they're
Yeah.
not getting the support they need in school, and how much that impacts on work. So that impacts hugely on their work. And if they can't work because their employer is not necessarily understanding if their
Mm-hmm.
child is sent home from school or if their child is at school and cannot go that day because they're in distress, um, then, often things start to unravel at work. Work gradually or even quickly becomes unsustainable. And I
Yeah.
realized that there were thousands and thousands and thousands of parents being affected by this, where work became unsustainable. So I ended up um, saying, I can do something here because I'm a careers
Mm-hmm.
advisor. And also, I have my own um, experience of this as my own son started to struggle in school, which is why we are now home educating as well,
Yeah.
because my own son started to struggle in school. So I can completely relate to, parents who find they've just got to find a new way of working that will accommodate the family situation that they're in. So some of the parents I work with are in work which is not working for them anymore. It's not flexible enough to meet their family's needs with their neurodivergent and disabled children. And some of them, are coming back from a career break that was an enforced career break that they had to
Yeah.
take because the world just didn't support them or their families,
Yeah.
either at school or at work. So it's the two things together that are inflexible. The schools are inflexible and work is also inflexible. So my job is to kind of help them with the work bit. There are a lot of people out there who help parents, coaches and, advocates that help parents with the school side and also managing, you know, helping their children with their neurodivergence at home. But there aren't many people out there helping with the work side of things. So I felt like there was a real need for that.
But yeah, I think there's still the need to constantly raise awareness about the struggles of, families of neurodivergence,
Yeah,
because you just opened my eyes to a number of things. And the truth is, most schools don't see things the way these parents see it. Most organizations don't
yeah,
see the way these parents see it. They
yeah,
just expect your child needs to be in school to learn.
yeah,
And it just
exactly.
always doesn't work that way. And for workplaces too, they expect, well, you need to come to the office, somebody needs to get your job done, but you have your
Yeah,
own struggles at home too. So there's actually
yeah.
really need for more exposure, and you're actually doing a very, very great job. You're doing something extremely interesting and helpful, and I'm sure your clients are grateful for what you do.
Thank you. I hope so. Yeah, I
Well,
think
I'm
parents
grateful because you're doing
I
something
think
for
parents
someone.
often feel like nobody's giving them any attention, nobody's recognizing
Mm-hmm.
all of that struggle. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, boss who all they see is like a parent who looks unreliable, right? Is like, an employee, sorry, who looks unreliable, who's like
Yeah.
canceling a meeting at the last minute or saying they can't go in on a particular day or they've
Mm-hmm.
not managed to deadline. They've not necessarily seen that that is somebody who's been loyal to that organization for the previous 20 years
Yeah,
and they will be
exactly.
loyal. They just need a bit of flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
The school also doesn't understand why the parent says, I can't manage this part-time timetable that the child has been given that requires the parent to come to the school at 1 p.m. and pick the child up because they have a full-time job. So
Mm-hmm.
the school putting things in place and making expectations of parents that are not realistic. And then they're fining them as well. They're fining them because the child hasn't, been into school. So they're getting it from all directions, really.
Very true. Very true. And that could be very, very stressful. So
Yes.
I would also want to ask, as a neurodivergent parent, how do you regulate your daily life, with job, being a parent, a partner, you're working all at the same time?
Yes.
How does it work for you?
It isn't easy. I can't proclaim
Imagine.
that I have it all sorted. I can't. And actually, one thing that you learn, and as I said, I'm 7 weeks into being a full-time home educator.
Mm-hmm.
So life is changing shape again. And I would say this is probably like third or fourth time that life has changed shape because I think we get to these different points and we have to like rethink everything. Um, and because it's not just me, it's like three other people in my household. There are a lot of moving parts, and we probably all neurodivergent. We actually currently have four diagnoses um, of neurodivergence in our household. Um, so I think, one of the things is that you really need to um, think about what everybody's needs are. Um, and make sure that your own needs aren't neglected in that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm AuDHD and I'm autistic and ADHD, I find that sometimes those things kind of pull in opposite directions and make it really especially hard. So
Mm-hmm.
my autistic side needs a lot of structure and planning. So for example, today I I start the day with getting my eldest ready for school. I then get my youngest, breakfast and everything. Then I know that, we have this podcast recording. I'm home educating then till 3 p.m. I finish, then do a couple of hours of work. I'm making dinner and I'm often working again, 9,
Mm-hmm.
10 p.m. at night. And that's the sort of structure of my day. And I need that structure. But the ADHD bit needs a little bit of chaos and a little bit of spontaneity in that as well. So sometimes I'll sit down and do some work and it's not the work that I intended to do.
To
I've
do.
tried things like time blocking. And that didn't work for me because it feels too imposed. It feels too rigid. So people say, you
Yeah.
set yourself an hour and you focus on this one thing. I get down in front of the computer and I say, right, now I need to do this. And every bit of me just rebels against that. I think I may be PDA as well, so pathological demand avoider, which you're probably familiar with. So I have a lot of demand avoidance. Um, so you kind of have to find a way that works for you, don't you?
Yeah,
And also
exactly.
be flexible as life changes
Mm-hmm.
shape, which it does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Life is constantly changing.
constantly. Yeah.
Okay. I know you've talked about this briefly, but I also wanted to use the opportunity to talk about, how important what you're doing, your consultation is to families. So, from your experience, how has it been like, for parents to juggle between being neurodivergent parents and families? And then how do you come in? How do you help those people?
Yeah, it's so hard because, I see it as like a whole family journey. And often at the point where I might start working with a parent, they might have their diagnosis might be quite recent. They may not have a diagnosis yet. They may not even consider themselves to be neurodivergent. They may not be neurodivergent, but many are. But what normally comes first is that their children are neurodivergent and they are diagnosed. Um, Often, so that because I work with sort of two groups of parents really. One is ones that have taken a career break already, and and the other that are actually still in work and trying to hold on. The
Okay.
ones that have taken a career break, um, they might be, say, diagnosed neurodivergent now, but when they were in work, they didn't know they were
Mm-hmm.
neurodivergent. So when they're thinking of coming back to work, they have all this worry about like how do I cope in work now? Now I know that
Fitting
I'm
in again.
ADHD or I know that I'm autistic because I can see all the struggles now that I had
Mm-hmm.
before. But now I'm aware of it. I don't feel confident the workplace can accommodate me. I don't know how to um, talk about my needs. Actually, I have a lot of strengths that were sort of crushed down by the workplace. So how do I find somewhere that will actually be a better fit for me? But then they're also struggling with a lot of practical constraints around their own family situation, which are the kind of things that we talked about, touched on before. So
Mhm.
practical constraints where they need the flexibility because their children may be at home, not able to go to school, or they're home educating. There might be a lot of complex, challenging needs that their children are presenting that make work difficult. So we often spend a lot of time talking about the flexibility. I call it needs and non-negotiables that they need. Do they need a fully working from home job?
Mhm.
What kind of hours can they work? Um, what's the minimum income that they require? So, like real practicalities like that. And then we often talk about values as well, and things like
Yeah,
confidence, and identity. So we go really deep because a lot of parents are struggling with all of those personal things about their confidence, about their identity. Um, that have kind of been neglected because what we do as parents is we always put our children first. Always put
true,
our children first. So
true.
sometimes working with me is an opportunity to say, we need to talk about that because
Hmm.
that's all the practical constraints. That's the kind of situation that we're working in, and we have to be very practical about that. There's no sense in me saying, what would you like to do as a neurodivergent person in an ideal world? Because we're not in an ideal world. But at the same time, we can't ignore that. I work a lot with values because I think neurodivergent people are very values driven. And if we are misaligned with our values, that's when we really, really struggle. So for some people, a value of giving something back to society for a cause
Yeah.
that they really believe in can be such a strong driver for an autistic or an ADHD person. It can be such a strong driver and it can like motivate you to achieve incredible things. But if your values are misaligned, your whole being is crushed.
It's crushed, true.
So I always say I try and help people find work that doesn't crush their soul.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's quite interesting. So what advice would you give to recently diagnosed parents?
I would say a couple of things. First of all, know that this is a journey. So I have owned my autism diagnosis, which came second after my ADHD one. I've only had that for a week, so it's still very new for me. And I had my report yesterday come through, and I had a big cry when I read that.
Oh,
So
sending
I
you
think,
hugs.
yeah, exactly. So I think, even though when I had the diagnosis, I felt really good because I felt like I was kind of like fully at home in my skin for the first time
Yeah.
ever, having the second diagnosis after
Hmm.
the ADHD one. I was like, right, and now I'm me. I'm going to embrace that. But then still, you know, 6 days later, I had a big cry, a big cry, and that's okay. So know that it's a journey as the first one, and the second one is seek out support, find a community, because the community of neurodivergent people, especially online, for me, has been life-changing. I have had neurodivergent friends in the past and not known often that they were neurodivergent because they were
Hmm.
on the same journey. But I've met an awful lot of fantastic people, and the AuDHD community is its own community in its own right. So when people who are autistic and ADHD, have that dual diagnosis, it's its own thing, and I'm discovering that. So community is so important. It will validate you, that people will hold you up when you go on a down. People will
Hmm.
bring you back up and you'll be able to give that back as well.
Thank you for that. And what advice would you also give to parents who have children that have just been diagnosed also?
I would say, Francisca, I would say all the same things that I've just said. Plus, the other thing is just don't let the system grind you down because
Mm.
it will. So when you encounter professionals, in schools and in the local government, in the health services, um, so it can really grind you down. So there's been a report recently, which is really interesting by an organization called Cerebra. It's called Systems Generated Trauma. And it's all about the trauma that is caused by systems to parents of neurodivergent children
Mm-hmm.
who are blamed um, by the system for actually just asking for support. So they come and ask for support, and then what they get back is that they are blamed and they are accused of um, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So really, seek out support and just try to protect yourself from that.
Thank you very much. It's been a wonderful time. But I would like to ask you one more question. Is it okay to put your information out here just in case you have people who will be willing to talk to you? A
Yes, of
lot of people are
course.
new to
Yeah.
this. A lot of people are trying to find their fates. And okay, that's perfect. So I'll make sure that once we're done with the production, all of your information is put out here. So definitely um you'll be getting contacts from a number of people.
Brilliant. I hope so. Thank you. It's
All
been a
right.
pleasure.
Thank you. I'll say thank you very much for taking out time to be with us today. I have personally learned a lot. I have been jotting down, if you noticed, I personally learned a lot, and I hope we could have some more conversations in the future. Thank you very much. And
Thank
thank you
you.
everyone for watching us. We will get in touch with you when we have our next episode. Have a wonderful day.